You know how every species in the galaxy has that one rule they all agree on? The one that gets carved into stone tablets and transmitted across light years and tattooed onto the forearms of diplomats so nobody ever forgets? Yeah, that rule is about us. And the really embarrassing part? We didn't even know we were breaking it until the fourth time. The Council of Sentient Species had existed for 11,000 years before humanity stumbled into the galactic community. 11,000 years of wars, alliances, trade routes, cultural exchanges, and most importantly, 11,000 years of learning. Learning what not to do. Learning where the bodies were buried. Learning which species could hold their liquor and which ones would dissolve your internal organs if you looked at them wrong. When a human delegation arrived at the council chambers for the first time, a converted cargo hauler with mismatched thrusters and a distress beacon that had been blinking for the last 3 years of their journey, the consensus was immediate and unanimous. Oh no, not because humans were dangerous, not because they were aggressive or unpredictable or armed to the teeth. The opposite, actually. The Council's preliminary assessment, filed by Senior Observer VRYL of the Kithmere Confluence, read like a nature documentary about particularly enthusiastic puppies. Subject species, Homo sapiens. Homeworld, Sol 3, designation, Earth. Technological level, moderate. Emotional regulation, poor. Impulse control, minimal. Threat assessment, negligible. Recommendation, standard observation protocol. No immediate restrictions required. VRYL had been wrong. Spectacularly, historically, catastrophically wrong. But, in his defense, he'd only watched the humans for 6 months. He'd seen their wars, their famines, their political dramas, and reality television. He'd seen them argue about whether a hot dog was a sandwich and cry at commercials about insurance. He'd seen them launch themselves into space on glorified firecrackers and land on their own moon with less computing power than a modern toaster. What he hadn't seen was what happened when humans found something new. The first incident happened on Thraxil 7, a Class C mining world in the Outer Veil. A human survey team had been granted limited access to catalog mineral deposits. Strictly observational, no contact with native life, no touching anything that moved. Standard protocols. Boring work. 8 hours of scanning rocks and filing reports. The survey team's leader was a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez. 43 years old. Mother of 2. PhD in xenogeology from a university that no longer existed because the building had been converted into a vertical farm during the food crisis of 41. She'd signed up for the Survey Corps because it paid better than teaching, and because her ex-husband had the house, and she needed to start over. She was not looking for trouble. She was looking for thorium deposits. What she found was a cave. Not a remarkable cave by galactic standards. 20 meters deep, narrow entrance, damp walls, the usual assortment of mineral formations. Vasquez's scanner picked up trace elements she didn't recognize. Nothing dangerous, just different. And she did what any geologist would do. She walked inside to take a closer look. This was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 happened about 30 seconds later, when she heard the whimpering. It came from a crevice in the back wall, too small for any adult to fit through. Vasquez crouched down, aimed her light into the gap, and saw a pair of large, wet eyes staring back at her. The creature was small, maybe the size of a house cat, with 6 legs, a coat of iridescent blue fur, and what appeared to be a broken leg dangling at an unnatural angle. Vasquez had been briefed on the non-interference protocols. She had signed forms. She had watched the mandatory training videos, which featured a particularly stern-looking Kithmere official explaining in great detail that any contact with undocumented species could trigger cascading ecological disasters, cultural contamination, or, in extreme cases, interspecies warfare. She had also been a mother for 14 years, and the thing was whimpering. "Hey," she said softly, reaching into the crevice. "Hey, it's okay. I've got you." The creature flinched. Vasquez stopped, let her hand hover in place, and waited. She hummed a little, something her daughter used to do when a neighbor's dog got scared during thunderstorms. After a long moment, the creature sniffed her fingers and leaned into her palm. She pulled it out gently, cradling the broken leg against its body, and spent the next 20 minutes fashioning a splint from a spare data cable and some medical tape she had in her kit. By the time her team leader found her, Vasquez had named the creature Blue and was explaining to it, in English, which it definitely didn't understand, the proper way to apply a pressure bandage. "What," said team leader Chun, "is that?" "It's a baby," said Vasquez. "Elena, that is an undocumented alien life form. It's a baby alien life form. It was hurt. What was I supposed to do? Leave it?" Chun opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He was a good man, Chun, patient, competent, the kind of leader who trusted his people to make the right call. But he had also been a soldier once, and soldiers know that the universe runs on rules for a reason. "Yes," he said finally. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do." The council found out 3 days later, when a routine inspection turned up a 6-legged blue creature sleeping in a nest made of thermal blankets and empty ration packets. The Thraxel system went into immediate lockdown. The survey team was recalled, and Vasquez found herself standing in front of the full council, still wearing her field jacket, with Blue wrapped around her shoulders like a living scarf. Senior observer VRYL stared at her. His eye stalks twitched in a pattern that translated roughly to "Are you kidding me?" "You performed unauthorized medical intervention," he said slowly, "on an undocumented species. Without protective equipment. Without quarantine protocols. Without asking anyone." "It was a baby," Vasquez said again. "Its leg was broken. You can't just—" "We have laws," VRYL interrupted. "Precise laws. Developed over millennia. The Thraxel Dominion spent 400 years recovering from a single unauthorized contact event. 400 years of cultural collapse, ecological restructuring, and armed conflict. All because one researcher felt sympathy for a creature that was not her own." Vasquez looked down at Blue. The creature had bonded to her in a way that nobody quite understood. It followed her everywhere, made a soft chirping sound when she talked, and had stopped whimpering entirely. Its leg was healing nicely. With respect, she said, "I'd do it again." The council voted unanimously. Humans were banned from interacting with unknown life forms. No contact, no approach, no sympathy. Any human found violating the ban would face immediate expulsion from council space and permanent revocation of exploration privileges. Vasquez was sent home. Blue stayed in council custody, relocated to a specialized beer facility where it reportedly refused to eat for 3 weeks and made that soft chirping sound constantly, like it was waiting for someone to answer. The galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief and went back to business as usual. For about 6 months. The second incident happened on the trade route between Yarrow Station and the KRYLL exchange. A human cargo vessel, the Lucky Penny, had been contracted to transport a shipment of medicinal herbs from the agricultural world of Tellar 3 to a medical facility in the core systems. Routine work. Good pay. No contact with unknown species required. The Lucky Penny was captained by a man named Marcus Webb, 51 years old. Former cargo hauler, former asteroid miner, former 3-time loser in the annual Rigel 7 drinking competition. He had a beard that looked like it was trying to escape his face, and a habit of naming his ships after things that weren't lucky at all. The Lucky Penny was his 4th vessel. The first 3 had been destroyed in increasingly creative ways. Webb was not a hero. He was not a diplomat. He was a man who liked coffee, quiet, and the steady hum of a properly calibrated engine. He had taken the Tellar 3 run because it was boring and because the pay was enough to cover his daughter's tuition at the Mars Institute of Technology. The distress signal came in at 0347 ship time. Webb was in the middle of a dream about his ex-wife's lawyer when the comms system blared to life. A burst of static and fragmented audio, overlaid with a translation that the ship's AI had pieced together from context. Disabled, engine failure, life support failing, requesting assistance. Anyone, please. Webb sat up, rubbed his eyes, looked at the navigation display. The signal was coming from an uncharted system, about 6 hours off his route. The ship's registry was unknown. The species was unknown. The language was unknown. The AI had flagged it as a dialect of something called Vorthin, which Webb had never heard of. AI, he said. What are the chances this is a trap? Insufficient data for probability assessment, Captain. However, Council regulations regarding unsolicited contact with unknown species. Yeah, I know the regulations. Webb stared at the display. He thought about his daughter's tuition. He thought about the Council's ban. He thought about the fact that someone out there was dying alone in the dark, and that he was the only ship within light years who could hear them scream. He thought about all of this for approximately 4 seconds. Set course for the signal, he said. Maximum speed. The Lucky Penny dropped out of FTL 6 hours later to find a wreck. The vessel, if you could call it that, was a tangled mess of organic plating and crystalline structures, the kind of ship that grew rather than was built. It had been torn open along its ventral hull, exposing a series of pressurized compartments that were rapidly losing atmosphere. Webb counted 4 life signs. Fading. Open a channel, he said. Broad spectrum. Let them know we're here. Captain, Council protocols explicitly prohibit. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you to open the damn channel. The AI complied. Webb spoke into the void, calm, steady, the voice of a man who had been in tight spots before and knew that panic was the real enemy. This is Captain Marcus Webb of the human vessel Lucky Penny. We've received your distress signal, and we're here to help. Can you hear me? Blink your lights if you can hear me. Silence. Then, faintly, the ship's running lights flickered twice. Webb grinned. Good. Now listen carefully. We're going to bring our ship alongside and establish a pressure seal. It's going to be rough, but we'll get you out. Just hang on. The rescue took 3 hours. Webb and his 2 crew members, a young engineer named Sato who could fix anything with duct tape and sheer stubbornness, and a cook named Delgado who had never wanted to be in space in the first place, maneuvered the Lucky Penny into position, extended the docking collar, and manually cut through the alien ship's hull to reach the survivors. The survivors turned out to be 4 members of a species called the Herillic. They looked like walking ferns if ferns had faces and hands and a distressing tendency to bleed sap when stressed. 3 were unconscious. The 4th, a scientist named Kel, who had been studying a binary star system when a meteor strike crippled their vessel, was barely conscious but coherent enough to stare at Webb with what he later learned was terror. You are human, Kel whispered, as Webb carried them through the airlock. That's right. The Council said humans would not come. They said you were forbidden. They said you would leave us to die. Webb set Kel down on a makeshift bed of cargo blankets and started checking their vital signs. The Council says a lot of things. But the law, I don't care about the law. Webb looked up, and there was something in his eyes that Kel would remember for the rest of their life. Not anger, not defiance, something softer and stranger, something like grief. I care about people dying alone in the dark. That's it. That's the whole thing. He went back to work. The Herillics survived. All 4 of them. They spent 2 weeks aboard the Lucky Penny while Webb rerouted the ship to the nearest Herillic outpost. And in that time, they learned a great deal about humans. They learned that humans cooked food for each other as a sign of affection. They learned that humans told jokes when they were scared. They learned that humans sang badly, enthusiastically, with no regard for rhythm or melody when they were happy. They also learned that humans were liars. Not malicious liars. Not deceptive liars. But humans, Kel discovered, had a peculiar relationship with authority. They obeyed rules when the rules made sense. When the rules didn't make sense, when the rules told them to let children die in caves, to leave strangers to suffocate in the dark, humans developed a remarkable capacity for forgetting, for looking the other way, for shrugging and saying whoops and doing the right thing anyway. The Council found out about the rescue when the Herillic filed a formal commendation. They were proud of Kel's survival. They wanted the galaxy to know that humans had saved their people against all laws and all logic simply because it was the right thing to do. The council was not happy. VRYL, who had been promoted to director of interspecies affairs despite, or perhaps because of his experience with humans, called an emergency session. His report was short and devastating. They cannot help themselves, he told the assembled delegates. It is not a choice for them. It is a compulsion. When a human sees suffering, something in their neural architecture demands action. Laws do not stop them. Consequences do not stop them. The only way to prevent human interference is to remove them from the situation entirely. The council voted again. The ban was expanded. Humans were not only prohibited from interacting with unknown life forms, they were now restricted to designated travel corridors, monitored at all times, and subject to automatic deportation for any violation, regardless of circumstance. Humanity's ambassador, a woman named Amina Okonkwo, who had spent the last 3 years trying to convince the galaxy that her species was worth trusting, stood up in the council chamber and said 6 words. You're making a terrible mistake. VRYL's eye stalks twitched. We are protecting the galaxy, Ambassador. No, Okonkwo said quietly. You're protecting yourselves from having to care. And that's a luxury we can't afford. She walked out. The galaxy celebrated. The humans were contained. The laws were clear. The crisis was over. They had no idea what was coming next. The third incident, the one that changed everything, did not happen on a mining world or a trade route. It happened on the edge of known space, in a region so remote that even the Council's most ambitious probes had never ventured there. A region called the Silent Gulf. The Silent Gulf was exactly what it sounded like, a vast expanse of empty space where no signals emerged and no ships returned. For centuries, the Council had assumed it was uninhabited, a natural barrier between galactic civilizations, useful only as a buffer zone and a cautionary tale for young explorers who dreamed too big. They were wrong. The truth emerged slowly in fragments and rumors and screams. A research station went dark, then a mining colony, then an entire system, billions of lives wiped from existence in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. The Council dispatched ships. The ships did not come back. They sent their best military forces, their most advanced weapons, their most cunning strategists. Nothing worked. The threat was called the Hive. It was not a species in the traditional sense. It was a process, a consuming intelligence that absorbed everything it touched and turned it into more of itself. Organic matter, technology, information. The Hive didn't destroy things. It assimilated them, learning and adapting and growing with each new acquisition. By the time the Council understood what they were facing, the Hive had consumed 17 systems and was accelerating. The war lasted 3 months. 3 months of retreats and sacrifices and increasingly desperate strategies. The Council threw everything they had at the Hive: plasma weapons, kinetic strikes, biological agents, even experimental reality-bending technology that the Kithmir had locked away for 1,000 years. Nothing stopped it. Nothing even slowed it down. On the 94th day of the war, the Hive reached the Yarrow system. Yarrow Station, the galaxy's largest trade hub, home to 3 million sentient beings from 100 different species, fell in 6 hours. The Council's military command was evacuated in chaos, leaving behind their wounded and their dead. Senior Observer VRYL was on one of the last ships out. He stood at the viewport, watching Yarrow Station burn, and felt something he had never felt before. Despair. They were going to lose. Not just the war, everything. The Council, the galaxy. 11,000 years of civilization, wiped out by a mindless hunger that didn't even know what it was destroying. The Hive didn't hate them. It didn't fear them. It didn't even see them. They were just fuel. A young aide approached him, trembling. Director VRYL. There's a transmission. From a human delegation. VRYL almost laughed. The humans. Of course. He had forgotten about them entirely. Confined to their travel corridors, monitored and restricted, irrelevant to the war effort. What could they possibly want? Put it through, he said. Ambassador Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. She looked haunted. She looked exactly like everyone else who had watched their world burn. I know you have no reason to trust us, she said. I know we've broken your laws. I know you think we're reckless and impulsive and dangerous. But right now you're losing. And we can help. VRYL's eye stalks went rigid. Ambassador, with respect, your species has no military capacity. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are barely space-worthy. There's nothing— I'm not talking about weapons, Okonkwo interrupted. I'm talking about the Hive. You've been trying to fight it like an enemy. But it's not an enemy. It's a system. And systems can be tricked. She explained. It took her 20 minutes. By the end, VRYL's mind was reeling. Not because the plan was complicated, but because it was insane. It violated every principle of warfare, every law of physics, every instinct for self-preservation. It was, quite simply, the stupidest thing he had ever heard. And it just might work. The plan required 3 things. First, a bait ship, something the Hive would want to consume, something packed with enough interesting technology to draw its attention. Second, a team of volunteers willing to fly that ship directly into Hive territory, knowing they would almost certainly die. Third, something that the Council had spent the last year trying to suppress. A human. Specifically, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the geologist who had started all of this by rescuing a blue creature from a cave. She had been living in exile on a small agricultural colony, tending to gardens and trying to forget that the galaxy had decided she was a threat. When the Council's message arrived, she was in the middle of harvesting carrots. She said yes before they finished asking. I don't understand, VRYL said when they met on the staging platform. He had traveled to the human colony personally, determined to see with his own eyes the creature that the Council had tried so hard to contain. You're not a soldier. You're not a strategist. You are a geologist. Why would you volunteer for a mission that will almost certainly kill you? Vasquez looked at him. She was older now, gray streaking her hair, lines around her eyes, the quiet patience of someone who had spent a long time waiting for something. Around her shoulders, wrapped like a living scarf, was blue. The creature had been returned to her after the heroic incident, when the Council decided that keeping them apart was more trouble than it was worth. It had grown larger, its fur now a deep sapphire, its chirping voice deeper and more musical. Because that's what we do, she said simply. We show up. The mission launched at dawn. The bait ship, a decommissioned Council vessel packed with experimental technology and false sensor readings, drifted toward Hive space, broadcasting a signal designed to look like a wounded animal. On board were 3 humans, Vasquez, Captain Marcus Webb, and a young engineer named Sato, who had volunteered before anyone could ask him twice. The Hive took the bait within hours. A tendril of its vast consciousness extended outward, enveloping the ship in a shimmering field of assimilation. To the Council's sensors, it looked like the ship was being digested, its systems failing, its signals degrading, its crew dying. But that was the trick. Humans, the Council had discovered, were wrong. Not morally wrong, biologically wrong. Their neural architecture was fundamentally incompatible with the Hive's assimilation process. Where other species' minds could be absorbed and repurposed, human minds resisted. They fought back. They introduced noise and chaos and unpredictability into the Hive's perfect system. It was like pouring sand into a machine. The Hive didn't know what to do with humans. It couldn't process them. It couldn't understand them. Every human it absorbed created a glitch in its consciousness, a tiny fracture in its perfect unity. 3 humans, absorbed simultaneously, created a cascade. Vasquez felt it happen. One moment she was herself, Elena, mother, geologist, woman who talked to animals, and broke rules for the right reasons. The next moment, she was more. She could feel the Hive around her, vast and ancient and terrified. Terrified because she was inside it now, and she was wrong, and she was spreading. She reached out through the chaos and found web. You feel that? Yeah. Feels like being drunk and on fire at the same time. That's the hive. It doesn't know what to do with us. So what do we do now? Vasquez thought about it. She thought about Blue, waiting for her back on the colony. She thought about her children, grown now, living their own lives on a planet she might never see again. She thought about the Council, watching from a safe distance, waiting to see if their desperate gamble would pay off. She thought about the things she had learned in all those years of being banned and restricted and told that she was dangerous. We break it, she said. From the inside, she started singing. It wasn't a beautiful song. It wasn't even a good song. It was a lullaby, the same one she had hummed to Blue in that cave, the same one she had sung to her children when they were small and scared of the dark. A simple melody, passed down through generations, full of all the messy, complicated, human things that the hive could never understand. Love, grief, hope, stubbornness, the absolute refusal to let the darkness win. Webb joined in. His voice was worse than hers, a gravelly baritone that wandered off key like a lost tourist, but he sang anyway. Sato joined next, his tenor surprisingly sweet, harmonizing with a confidence he had no right to feel. The hive screamed, not a physical scream, a psychic one, a shattering of its perfect unity as three human minds introduced chaos into its system. The glitches spread, the fractures widened. The hive had spent millennia consuming and assimilating, building itself into an unstoppable force of nature. But it had never encountered anything like this. It had never encountered something that refused to be assimilated. Something that fought back not with weapons or strategy, but with song. On the council ships, watching from the edge of the silent gulf, the assembled delegates saw something impossible. The hive's tendrils began to retract. Its assimilation field flickered and died. The systems it had consumed, the research stations, the mining colonies, Yarrow Station itself, began to reappear on their sensors, damaged but intact. The humans had done it. They had broken the hive. But that wasn't the miracle. The miracle happened 3 hours later when the bait ship's escape pod launched from the heart of hive space. Against all logic, against all probability, against every calculation the Council's best minds could run, Vasquez, Webb, and Sato were alive. Changed, perhaps. Scarred, certainly. But alive. The escape pod docked with the Council flagship. VRYL was there to meet them, his eye stalks trembling with something he refused to call emotion. How, he asked. Vasquez stepped out of the pod. She was pale, exhausted. Her hands were shaking, but she was smiling. You spent 11,000 years learning how to avoid contact, she said. Learning how to stay safe. Learning how to build walls between yourselves and everything you didn't understand. And that worked for a while. But walls don't just keep things out. They keep you in. She reached up and touched Blue, who had somehow found its way onto the flagship and was now wrapped around her shoulders like a living scarf. The galaxy banned humans from interacting with unknown life forms, she said. But the galaxy forgot something important. What? VRYL asked. Vasquez looked at him, really looked at him, the way humans looked at things they were about to save. Unknown life forms are just friends you haven't met yet. The Council reconvened the next day. The ban was repealed. The travel corridors were dissolved. And for the first time in 11,000 years, the galaxy's oldest law, the law that said, do not touch, do not interfere, do not care, was replaced with something new. Something human. If something is hurting, help it. If something is scared, comfort it. If something is dying alone in the dark, go get it. Because that's what we do. We show up. In the years that followed, the galaxy learned to be more human. The Council established a new department, the Office of First Contact and Unauthorized Friendship, staffed primarily by humans who had been banned, restricted, and told that their instincts were dangerous. The hive's remnants were studied and understood, not destroyed. Blue grew to the size of a small horse and became the unofficial mascot of the human delegation, following Vasquez everywhere she went. And Senior Observer VRYL who had spent so long trying to contain humanity, finally understood what Ambassador Okonkwo had tried to tell him all those years ago. You're protecting yourselves from having to care. He wrote a letter to his own species years later, after he had retired from the council and taken up gardening on a small human colony. It was a simple letter transmitted across light years to a people who had taught him to fear everything outside their borders. We thought the universe was dangerous, he wrote, and we were right. But we were wrong about what made it dangerous. It's not the unknown that kills us. It's the certainty, the belief that we already know everything worth knowing, that we've already met everyone worth meeting, that we've already loved everyone worth loving. The humans taught me that the universe is full of surprises, and that the best thing you can do when you find something new and strange and terrifying is to reach out your hand and say hello. Because you never know. They might say hello back.